The crack of the rifle cut through the California afternoon like a knife through silence. 800 meters downrange, the target, a ballistic dummy positioned behind partial cover, programmed to move in unpredictable intervals, dropped with surgical precision. The simulation monitor flashed red. Center mass, fatal hit, perfect score. Master Chief Derek Vance stood at the observation tower, binoculars pressed to his face, frozen mid-breath. Around him, the murmur of conversation among the Allied observers, Australian SAS and British SBS officers, died instantly. On the firing line below, 24 SEAL candidates and instructors stared downrange, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. Who took that shot? Vance's voice came through the comms, sharp and controlled, but carrying an edge that made everyone on the range straighten. I need an answer. Now. Silence. The kind that feels heavier than words. He scanned the firing line through his optics, moving methodically from position to position. The primary sniper team, 2 experienced petty officers who were supposed to make this shot, stood frozen, their rifles still aimed, but not fired. The spotter was staring at his data book like it held answers he couldn't find. Neither had taken the shot. Then Vance's binoculars stopped. There, at the far end of the line, in a position that should have been observation only, Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves was already clearing her rifle. Smooth, mechanical, routine. Her face showed nothing. No pride, no excitement, no acknowledgement of what she'd just done. She ejected the magazine, locked the bolt back, visually inspected the chamber, and set the weapon down with the same clinical efficiency a surgeon might use closing an incision. Vance's jaw tightened. Around him, he heard one of the Australian officers mutter something appreciative. One of his own instructors shifted uncomfortably and said nothing. Maya Reeves, the Marine liaison, the woman most of his team barely acknowledged. The one they dismissed as administrative ballast, a diversity checkbox shuffled into a support role where she couldn't cause problems or slow anyone down. She just made a shot that maybe 6 people on this entire base could make under pressure. And she'd done it like it was nothing. The contrast was immediate and stark. The loud confidence of the SEAL candidates, always ready with tactical opinions and locker room bravado, versus this silent, composed woman who just demonstrated a level of skill that didn't exist in someone they'd written off. The emotional hook sank deep. Vance could feel it in his chest, an uncomfortable mixture of anger at his own blindness and something else he couldn't quite name yet. He keyed his radio. All personnel, hold position. Exercise paused. Down on the firing line, Maya picked up her gear bag, slung it over her shoulder, and waited. She didn't look toward the observation tower, didn't acknowledge the stairs, just stood there, quiet and still, like she'd been doing for the past 3 weeks. Waiting for orders, waiting to be dismissed, waiting to be invisible again. 3 weeks earlier, the morning briefing room at the Naval Special Warfare Center had felt like ice wrapped in professionalism. Maya Reeves sat in the back row, hands folded on the table in front of her, watching as Master Chief Vance reviewed the week's training schedule with his instructor team. She'd arrived 2 days prior, her orders crisp and clear, assigned as a Marine liaison instructor under a new Department of Defense initiative to integrate female combat veterans into special operations training environments. Not as candidates. That door remained firmly closed, but as support staff, administrative coordinators, and cultural advisors. The program was controversial. Everyone knew it. No one was pretending otherwise. When Vance introduced her to the room, his tone was professional but cool. This is Staff Sergeant Reeves, USMC. She'll be supporting training operations as part of the Joint Services Integration Program. Her background is administrative and logistics. She'll be assisting with range safety, equipment coordination, and training documentation. Administrative and logistics. The words landed like a dismissal. A few instructors nodded politely. Most didn't react at all. The SEAL candidates in the room, young, confident men fresh from grueling selection courses, barely glanced her direction. Vance continued without pause. Standards don't change for politics. Standards don't change for optics. We run this program the way we've always run it. Everyone clear. A chorus of affirmatives. Maya said nothing. She'd heard variations of this speech before. After the briefing, she was handed a clipboard, a radio, and a schedule that kept her far from anything involving triggers or tactics. Range safety meant checking equipment logs and monitoring weather conditions. Equipment coordination meant inventory spreadsheets and supply requisitions. Training documentation meant typing after-action reports based on what others told her. She accepted it without complaint. She learned a long time ago that arguing didn't change minds. Only results did, and they weren't giving her opportunities for results. What they didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to look up in her service record because they'd stopped reading after liaison assignment, was that Maya Reeves had been a Marine Scout sniper in MOS 0317. She'd done 2 rotations in Somalia between 2011 and 2013, during the height of counter-piracy operations and the al-Shabaab insurgency in Mogadishu. Not the publicized missions, not the CNN-friendly operations, the quiet ones, the kind embedded with Joint Special Operations Command elements, working in small teams in a city that chewed up and spit out anyone who underestimated it. She'd been part of Task Force Atlas, a unit so compartmentalized that most of its operations remained classified a decade later. She'd worked rooftops, vehicle interdictions, and high-value target observation in an urban environment where 300 meters was considered long range, and every shot mattered because backup was 20 minutes away on a good day. In June 2012, during an operation that later got sanitized out of official reports, her 4-person team had been compromised on a Mogadishu rooftop while observing an al-Shabaab safe house. The compound below had erupted, 30 hostiles, maybe more, pouring into the streets. Her team leader took shrapnel in the first 60 seconds. Her spotter, Corporal Danny Chun, 24 years old from Sacramento, caught a round through the neck 4 minutes later. Maya had held that rooftop for 6 hours. Alone. 63 confirmed kills, firing until her barrel glowed and extraction finally punched through. They'd recommended her for the Medal of Honor. It got downgraded to a Navy Cross for operational security reasons, then quietly filed away because acknowledging the mission meant acknowledging where they'd been and what they'd been doing. 3 months later, an IED on a supply route took Danny's replacement and shattered Maya's left shoulder. 14 surgeries, 18 months of physical therapy, medically cleared for duty, but moved stateside, reassigned to training support roles, where she couldn't deploy again and where her skills could quietly atrophy until she became a memory. Now she was here, skilled, scarred, and utterly invisible. The world saw a diversity hire. The truth was a combat-hardened legend no one bothered to learn about. The disrespect didn't come all at once. It built slowly, in small corrosive moments that accumulated like rust. During a morning brief in Week 1, a young SEAL candidate, couldn't have been more than 23, leaned over to his buddy and said, just loud enough, "Participation trophy," when Maya walked into the room. Others laughed. Vance, standing at the front reviewing range schedules, either didn't hear or chose not to address it. Maya took her seat and opened her folder. Said nothing. In Week 2, she was excluded from a tactical debrief about sniper integration techniques. When she asked the lead instructor if he needed her notes from the range observations, he'd smiled politely and said, "We've got it covered, thanks." The door closed. She stood in the hallway for a moment, then returned to her desk. During a night navigation exercise, she'd been called to retrieve night vision equipment from the armory. When she arrived, the door was locked. She radioed back. No response for 5 minutes. Then 10. Finally, 20 minutes later, a junior instructor showed up, apologized for the mix-up, and let her in. She'd stood outside in the 40-degree coastal night, waiting, knowing it wasn't an accident, but unable to prove it. The isolation wasn't overtly malicious. No one screamed at her. No one sabotaged her work. But it was constant, exhausting, a low-grade rejection that made it clear she existed on the margins of a world that didn't want her there. The audience, the people watching this story unfold, would feel it building. Every dismissal, every joke, every moment of erasure compounding into something that felt suffocating. But there were clues, small things, moments when the mask slipped and the truth showed through, visible only to those paying attention. On the range one afternoon, Maya watched a candidate struggling with breathing rhythm during live fire. His shots were grouping 4 inches right, consistent error. She stepped closer, watched for 30 seconds, then said quietly, "You're anticipating recoil. Exhale longer. Let the shot surprise you." He glanced at her, confused, then ignored the advice. His next 3 shots landed in the same spot, 4 inches right. During a debrief about an urban combat simulation, someone mentioned sight lines from elevated positions. Maya said, almost to herself, "Mog rooftops taught you fast. Anything above 3 stories, you own the intersection or you're dead." No one asked what she meant. The conversation moved on. One afternoon, Vance noticed her shoulder scar when her collar shifted during rifle maintenance. It was extensive, the kind of scarring that comes from fragmentation and reconstructive surgery, not accidents. He paused, something crossing his face. Maya caught him looking. Their eyes met. She said nothing, turned back to her work. Another day, a junior instructor, cocky, fresh from his first deployment, made a comment to another Marine liaison about how nice it must be to collect a paycheck without ever going downrange. He said it loud enough for Maya to hear. She was 10 feet away, logging equipment serial numbers. She didn't look up, didn't correct him, just kept writing. The emotional frustration built. The audience would feel it. The injustice of someone so skilled being treated as invisible, the weight of scars no one acknowledged, the isolation of being the only person in the room who knew the truth. That evening, after everyone left, Maya stayed on the range. She pulled her personal rifle from its case, a custom-built MK-13 Mod 7, worn in ways that only come from field use, and ran breathing drills. In through the nose, slow and controlled. Out through the mouth, longer than the inhale. Her hands were steady. Her face showed nothing. The quiet competence radiated in the empty space. But no one was watching. The crisis began on a Wednesday morning during the second day of a multi-phase joint training exercise. The event was designed to showcase Naval Special Warfare's precision and tactical excellence to Allied observers, senior officers from Australian SASR and British SBS who'd flown in specifically to evaluate integration techniques for their own programs. The schedule was tight, the scrutiny intense, and the pressure to perform flawless. Day 1 had gone smoothly. Day 2 started to fracture. The scenario was a simulated high-value target interdiction. Hostage rescue in an urban environment with live-fire elements, multiple breach points, and precision neutralization requirements. The lead sniper team, 2 experienced petty officers with multiple deployments, was positioned for a critical 800-meter shot on a hostile, holding a hostage behind partial cover. 3 attempts, 3 misses. The wind had picked up, gusting crosswinds at 15 to 20 knots, and the shooters were misreading the corrections. Each miss triggered simulated casualties for the assault element. The exercise monitor flashed red. Vance called a halt. The observers shifted in their seats, expressions carefully neutral, but noting everything. Failure here wasn't just embarrassing. It was a black mark on the entire command's reputation. Reset, Vance ordered, voice controlled but tight. We're running it again. But they were behind schedule now, and the weather was worsening. The marine layer was pushing in from the coast, adding moisture that would affect ballistics. The wind was inconsistent, swirling through the range infrastructure in ways that made accurate reading nearly impossible without experience. The next phase required the precision shot again, 800 meters, moving target with partial concealment, simulating a hostage taker. It was the centerpiece of the demonstration, the moment designed to show Allied forces what SEAL sniper training produced. The original sniper team was rattled. Vance could see it in their body language, second-guessing, overthinking, confidence shattered. He pulled them, scanned his roster. Every other qualified long-range shooter was committed to another element of the exercise or unavailable. A junior instructor standing near Vance said, half joking, trying to break the tension, "What about Reeves? She's technically range qualified, right?" It was said mockingly, a throwaway comment. But Vance was out of options, the clock was running, and the observers were watching. He keyed his radio. "Reeves, what's your location?" A pause. Then her voice, flat and professional. Equipment staging area, standing by. You're up. Report to firing line 3, spotter position, overwatch. Primary shooter will be Petty Officer Mendez. You call wind and distance. Do not engage unless I give explicit clearance. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. 5 minutes later, Maya was in position. Mendez, a SEAL candidate filling in under pressure, was beside her, visibly nervous. The scenario began. The target started its programmed movement pattern. 800 meters downrange, the ballistic dummy shifted behind partial cover, visible for 3-second intervals. Mendez was scanning through his scope, trying to calculate wind drift. His breathing was too fast. Maya could hear it. She looked downrange, not through optics, just natural vision. Watched the dust swirl at 200 meters. Noted the flag angle at 400. Saw the mirage shimmer. Heat distortion rising off the berm that indicated wind direction and approximate speed at mid-range. 2 seconds. That's all it took. The same read she'd done hundreds of times on Mogadishu rooftops where hesitation meant death. Mendez was still calculating. The window was closing. 3 seconds visible. Then the target would drop behind cover for another 8-second cycle. If they missed this window, the scenario failed, the exercise collapsed, and the entire demonstration fell apart in front of Allied observers who would report back that American special operations training wasn't as precise as advertised. Maya didn't ask permission, didn't announce her decision. She simply adjusted her position, brought her rifle up, the same MK-13 she'd carried in Somalia, now resting against the same shoulder that had been shattered and rebuilt, read the wind one more time, exhaled slowly, and squeezed. The shot cracked. 800 meters. Moving target. Crosswind. Perfect center mass. The range went silent. Who took that shot? Vance's voice cut through the comms, sharp and demanding. No one answered. He scanned the firing line through his binoculars, moving methodically until he found her. Maya was already clearing her rifle. Face neutral. Movements routine, like she'd just completed a training drill, not made a shot that most snipers would celebrate for weeks. Vance climbed down from the observation tower and walked to the firing line. Around him, instructors and candidates were murmuring. The Allied observers were quiet, watching. He approached Maya directly. For the first time in 3 weeks, he really looked at her. Not past her, not through her, at her. The rifle. Custom MK-13 Mod 7 with more patterns that didn't come from range time. The barrel showed copper fouling consistent with high round counts. The stock had grip tape worn smooth in specific places, thumb, support hand, cheek weld, marks that only develop after thousands of repetitions in field conditions. Her shoulder. The scar he'd noticed before, now contextualized. Not an accident. Combat injury. Significant trauma. Surgically repaired. Then his eyes caught something else. A small patch on her gear bag, partially hidden by the strap. Marine Scout sniper insignia. The crossed rifles with the distinctive 0317 MOS identifier. Next to it, a unit tab. Faded, sun-bleached, but recognizable if you knew what you were looking at. Task Force Atlas. East Africa. JSOC rotation. Vance's expression changed completely. The pieces snapped together in his mind. The isolation, the competence, the scars, the unit tab. He knew those operations. He'd worked with Atlas personnel during a coordination mission in 2013. He knew what that unit did and who they selected. He keyed his radio. Reeves a word. Private. They walked away from the firing line, out of earshot. The wind gusted between them, carrying the smell of ocean, salt, and cordite. Somalia, he asked directly. She nodded once. How many confirmed? She hesitated. It wasn't a question people asked lightly. Confirmed kills weren't bragging rights. They were ghosts. But he wasn't asking casually. He needed to know who he'd been dismissing for 3 weeks. 63, she said quietly. His face went pale. That number in that theater with that unit meant she wasn't just competent. She was legend tier, elite within elite. The kind of operator who didn't need to prove anything because the proof was written in mission reports that would stay classified for decades. He knew the story now, or enough of it. The Mogadishu rooftop engagement in 2012. the team that got compromised. The lone sniper who held position for 6 hours against overwhelming odds and walked away with a Navy Cross no one could talk about. That was her. This quiet, dismissed woman they'd been treating like administrative burden was the operator from a story he'd heard whispered in secure briefing rooms. Vance returned to the range and called everyone to formation. The candidates assembled quickly, confused. The instructors gathered, sensing something had shifted, but not understanding what. "Listen up," Vance said, his voice carrying across the range. "Staff Sergeant Reeves is no longer assigned to liaison support. Effective immediately, she is lead marksmanship instructor for this command. You will address her as Instructor Reeves. When she speaks, you will listen. When she gives guidance, you will follow it. This is not a suggestion." "Understood." A chorus of "Yes, Master Chief," rang out, confused but compliant. The SEALs were silent. The candidates looked at each other, trying to understand what had just happened. The emotional reversal hit like a physical force. Respect, not given out of politics or courtesy, but demanded by undeniable, terrifying skill they hadn't known existed. Maya stood at the edge of the formation, expression unchanged. She didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the shift, just waited for orders. Vance caught her eye across the formation. She gave him the smallest nod. Not gratitude, just acknowledgement. Professional to professional. In the days that followed, things shifted subtly but meaningfully. Candidates started asking Maya for guidance on breathing techniques, wind reading, and position stability. She gave advice in the same calm, minimal way. No grandstanding, no speeches. Just quiet instruction that worked. Vance integrated her into tactical planning sessions. The joke stopped. The isolation ended. But Maya didn't change. She was still quiet, still professional, still carrying the weight of what she'd seen and lost. She didn't suddenly become talkative or social. She remained exactly who she'd always been, someone who let her work speak and didn't need validation. One evening, after a particularly long training day, Vance found her on the range. She was running drills alone, same as before. He stood at the tower entrance, watching for a moment before speaking. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked. "Why didn't you correct us?" She lowered her rifle, considered the question. When she answered, her voice was even, no bitterness, just truth. Would it have mattered? He wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that if she'd told them, shown them her records, explained her background, things would have been different from day one. But he knew better. Words didn't change minds in this world. Results did. Respect wasn't given because someone asked for it. It was earned through demonstrated competence, usually in moments of crisis when there was no choice but to see the truth. He had no response. She didn't seem to expect one. The moral wasn't delivered through a speech or a lesson. It lived in the story itself, in the contrast between loud confidence and quiet capability, between what people assumed and what was real. The most dangerous people in the room are often the ones saying the least. Respect isn't owed because of rank, gender, or appearance. It's earned through competence, sacrifice, and the scars no one sees unless they bother to look. The following week, Maya was back on the range during off hours, running the same drills she'd been running since she arrived. But this time, she wasn't alone. A few candidates had started showing up, standing at a distance, watching in silence, learning without asking, observing the way she read wind, controlled breathing, and made shots that seemed impossible until you understood the thousands of hours of practice that made them routine. She didn't acknowledge them, didn't perform for them, just continued her work. Some warriors don't need to prove anything. They already have. You just weren't paying attention.